Hello and good morning and a very warm welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Forum for the Future of Agriculture 2025. Let's start with introductions. I'm Stephen Sacker.
And I'm Rose O'Donovan, Editor-in-Chief of the Brussels-based publication AgriFacts.
Rose, it is absolutely fantastic to be with you again. I think this is our fourth year together.
Our fourth year in a row. We must have done something right the last number of years,
Yeah,
Stephen.
indeed. And you know what? It makes me feel a little bit old to be here because I have been coming to the Forum for more than a decade, and it is terrific to be back with you again today. You know that old Chinese saying about we live in interesting times? I guess there are perhaps times that are just too interesting. And maybe this year we're in one of those phases where there is so much going on in the world that will have an impact on food production, on agriculture, on global trade flows, that there is an awful lot for us to unpick today. Leave alone all of the discussions that we have year on year about the environmental impacts of agriculture, about sustainability, about innovation and technology, all of that to come in what promises to be, I think, a really, really interesting day of discussion. And Rose, I know you've got more detail on how it's going to unfold.
Certainly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this gathering is exploring new frontiers for agri-food system transformation. And I think you would agree that this event is particularly timely, as sustainable agriculture production and food security are at the very top of the political agenda. The event, of course, also comes a number of weeks after the publication of the Vision for Agriculture and Food on February 19th. Plus, we await with bated breath for tomorrow's so-called Liberation Day and President Donald Trump's plans, tariff plans, and the impact that they will have on the agri-food sector, but more on that later with Stephen Sacker. So we have a very wide and varied agenda to get through, with an impressive lineup of speakers and guests. I'm just breaking out there. Okay. From a former NASA astronaut to a freestyle diver and explorer, and just about everything in between. Okay, thank you, Arnd. Apologies for that. First technical glitch of the morning. Let's hope it's the last. But before we kick off proceedings, allow me to run through some housekeeping announcements, if I may. We'd like to make this forum as interactive as possible, and there will be an opportunity later on for participants to ask questions. We have roving microphones available here at the Square for audience members. And for those of you joining us online, a very warm welcome to one and all. You can send us through your questions in English or in French in the chat box that should appear just below me on your screen. You can, of course, follow the forum on X at Forum for Agriculture. And if you do tweet something, be sure to mention hashtag Forum for Ag. I would now ask those of you here at the Square to mute your mobile phones. I look forward to guiding some of the panel discussions during the course of the day. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave you in the capable hands of my co-host, Stephen Sacker. So over to you, Stephen. Take it away.
Rose, thank you very much indeed. Just to re-emphasize something Rose said, I think she, and certainly I, love the engagement that we get here at the Forum. So through the course of all of the discussions, the panels, the keynotes, do frame your own questions. If you have thoughts and questions that come out of what you're hearing, believe me, we'll give you every opportunity. We've got the roving microphones, so do not be shy today. There's so much energy we get from you in the audience, from your insights and questions, so the roving mics will do their work, and we want to hear from you through the course of the day. Now, as I just said a few moments ago, I've been coming to the Forum, and I always proudly say at the very beginning, I'm a farmer's son. So this event means a great deal to me in all sorts of different ways. I am truly interested in all of the issues that we go through here at the Forum. I've been coming for a number of years, but I'm delighted to say that the first introduction I need to make is to a guy that you are also all very familiar with because he's been coming here for many, many years too. He is the chair of the Forum, Janusz Potocznik. Janusz, I believe this is a decade now that you've been chairing the Forum, so we need to give you an extra warm round of applause today. Come up and give us your thoughts at the very beginning of the day. Welcome.
Good morning, and thank you, Stephen. It was a very nice and polite way of saying that we are getting old. ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be again with you. Good morning and welcome to the 17th annual conference of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. Let me start with some general thoughts relevant to all of us, continue with some more important for food system and farmers, and finish with some connected to the forum. As already said, we are living in strange times. I guess very few would not agree with this statement. Times where one should dig deep into the human nature with the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. Philosophy, of course. Starting with German philosopher Hegel best explaining the uncertainty around us in one sentence, saying, "The only thing we can learn from the history is that we learn nothing from history." And continue with one of the most famous and outspoken philosophers of our time, I like to quote a lot, due to his provocative but constructive nature, my fellow citizen Slavoj Žižek. Let me try to summarize some of his connected thoughts about people and the system. Beyond the fiction of reality, there is the reality of the fiction. We are not dreamers. We are awaking from a dream turning into a nightmare. We are not destroying anything. We are watching the system destroy itself. We cannot change people, but you can change the system so that people are not pushed in doing the evil things. About our times and challenges. In short, the truly courageous stance is to admit that the light at the end of the tunnel is most probably the headline of a train approaching us from the opposite direction. It is clear that we are approaching the ecological and digital apocalypse, but we should not lose nerves. Everything under heaven is in utter chaos. The situation is excellent. And finally, about economy, politics, and our role, the role of all of us here today attending the forum. It is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of the capitalism. Political issues are too serious to be left only to politicians. Dear friends, everything starts with values. Prosperity, equity, freedom, peace, and democracy in a sustainable environment are leading our European way. Europe is on a strategic crossroad. Simplifying, I see two main alternative options. Going defensive, more introverted, which is more likely. Focusing on security policy, for example, arming ourselves to provide better capacity and assurance for self-defense, which is hardly avoidable. Putting political power behind speeding up the enlargement process to strengthen a safety belt around existing European Union, which is of course needed and welcomed. But to become a well-recognized and also listened strategic power, more than that would be needed. In decades spent in European policy space, one of the complaints one could hear most is that we are the major economic power, important trade partner, and leading the world by providing help to those in need, but not considered adequately in international geostrategic relations. Building our strategic importance and power would require a higher level of integration in at least 3 areas: fiscal, external, and yes, also defense policy. Take, for example, fiscal policy. Member states still use taxes to compete against each other and then collectively complain that we are not competitive via the rest of the world. We do not use the power of taxes to change the direction of travel, like agreeing through joint policies at EU level to tax more the things we would like to see less, and tax less the things we would like to see more. Using state subsidies and public procurement for making transition possible. And in the first place, getting rid of tax havens, escape rooms for rich people and rich companies. I can already hear some saying that this is not realistic and too ambitious. But if this would be the thinking of the founding fathers of the European Union, we would not have it in the first place. One of the main ingredients should be also strengthening of the internal market, including the introduction of the concept of the fifth freedom, the freedom of movement of knowledge. I have introduced that concept already back in 2007, and it was nicely picked up and deepened by Leta's report, Much More Than a Market. The report argues that the single market, which is based on the free movement of goods, services, people, and capital, is outdated and not fit for the 21st century. Those four freedoms fall short in addressing the shift from an economy based on ownership to a new one based on access and sharing. The freedom of investigating, exploring, and creating for the benefit of humankind without disciplinary or artificial borders and limitations. It is an idea whose time has come. European Green Deal kick-started EU-wide efforts for a very much needed whole economy and society transformation. The direction set by the Green Deal should remain the North Star also in the future. When it comes to sustainability, the world has not changed to better in few recent years, quite the contrary. But we cannot ignore also the recent developments, the new geostrategical reality and challenges related to them, the need for strengthening our competitiveness and fairness on the top of security needs, the priorities cross-cutting all recently adopted European Commission policy documents, and are, of course, all important directions to consider. Still, we must understand that integration of those priorities with the vision already set by the European Green Deal is critical for a well-balanced systemic strategic approach. We could never overstate the importance of natural resources in our life. Natural resources are the foundation of our economies and societies. Access to and use of natural resources have been in human history always closely related to the level of well-being achieved by nations. Just think about the efforts of nations related to the access of land, water, oil and gas, various minerals, or precious metals like gold. It was also driving the geopolitical efforts of consumption countries to politically control the resource-rich countries. Many times, unfortunately, also connected to the reasons leading to the lack of stability, security, resulting in conflicts and wars. The whole history of the colonialization of nature is central to fairness and equity. For those whose economies depend on resource extraction, this is not abstract policy discussion. It is a question of security, economic stability, social development, and environmental resilience. Natural resources, land and water and materials, which include biomass, metals, non-metallic minerals and fossil fuels, so everything extracted from the earth, are not used with care, nor with environmental and social sustainability in mind. We must identify the necessary balance among human needs and the capacity of our planet to support meeting our needs and absorbing the negative effects of our behavior. Global Resource Outlook, released a year ago, is clear. 4 provisioning systems providing human needs: energy, food, built environment, and mobility are the most resource-intensive, accounting for 90% of all global material use and deserve most of our policy attention. However, these material needs are very different across various country income groups. In low-income countries, 54% of materials are used for providing food needs. In lower middle-income countries, 64% is used for providing food and housing needs. In high middle-income countries, which are in the most resource-intensive phase of development, 68% of materials are used for providing housing and mobility needs. And in our countries, high-income countries, material needs are relatively equally shared among all four most resource-intensive human needs. For food provision, which is in the center of our attention, in low-income countries, we use, as you have heard, 54% of all extracted from the earth, 36% in low-middle, 20% in high-middle, and 19% in high-income countries. This is more than a clear signal and a proof of the role and importance food and agriculture plays in our daily lives. It is an essential need we must satisfy first, before all other needs are considered. And in these unpredictable, unsecure, volatile times, food systems, farmers deserve even more attention and even more support. Exploring new frontiers of the agri-food system transformation, the substance leading our debates today is thus a must. When it comes to impacts, food system is a critical factor for water stress as well as for land and freshwater-related biodiversity loss. It is less important, but still very important, connecting to the climate change. Last time I have talked about connection of food system to biodiversity loss. Today, I would like to draw your attention to the recent alarming scientific warning related to the water stress. It was released by the Global Commission on the Economics of Water in the second half of last year, titled Valuing the Hydrological Cycle as a Global Common Good. I'm quoting, "The world faces a growing water disaster for the first time in human history. The hydrological cycle is out of balance, undermining an equitable and sustainable future for all. Restoring stability of the water cycle is critical not only in its own right, but to avoid failing on climate change and safeguarding all the Earth ecosystems. It will preserve food security, keep economics and jobs opportunities growing, and ensure a just and livable future for everyone. We have fundamentally put the hydrological cycle itself under unprecedented stress, with growing consequences for communities and countries everywhere. While itself a victim of climate change, the degradation of freshwater ecosystems, including the loss of moisture in the soil, has become a driver of climate change and biodiversity loss. The result is a more frequent and increasingly severe droughts, floods, heat waves, wildfires playing out across the globe, and the future of growing water scarcity with grave consequences for human security. Nearly 3 billion people and more than half of the world's food production are now in areas where total water storage is projected to decline. We should understand and recognize that the costs entitled in actions needed are very small in comparison to the harm that continued inaction will inflict on economies and humanity." End of quote. No need to explain you how important these dramatic developments are for the future of all of us attending the forum, for food system and agriculture, for farmers, for all of us. Dear friends, strategical dialogue on the future of agriculture was certainly an important step in the direction to consider and reconcile the interests we should keep in mind when talking about the food system. As summarized by Commission President van der Leyen, we all want a thriving food and farming sector across our continent that rewards our farmers, citizens, and precious natural heritage. With this report, we have a very solid foundation for the development of a new vision for food and farming in Europe. Like many others, the Forum welcomed the publication of Commissioner Hansen's Vision for the Future of Agriculture in February, particularly as many of the ideas and recommendations reflect our own thinking and ideas contained in our call to action for the transformation of the agri-food system, which we published 2 years ago. In particular, the key element of this seems to lie around how we finance the transition and sustain it. For that reason, the Forum is certainly undertaking a substantial exercise together with its partners, exploring how we take a systemic approach to this. For us, it means anchoring public and private finance in the proposed benchmarking system, with a prominent role for improved outcomes on soil health, and exploring ways that we can evolve our approach to public funding, in particular the next reform of the CAP, catalyze the development of private incentives for climate action, preservation of natural capital and biodiversity restoration, leverage private finance, and de-risk the transition for both farmers and land managers and agribusiness as a whole. We expect to publish our report in the coming month and believe it can make a substantive contribution to how Commissioner's vision can be implemented. Call to action, as mentioned, is now in the second year. As you might recall, it set out 7 commitments by the Forum for the transformation of the agri-food system. We started from the premise that the status quo was not an option and that all stakeholders needed to come together to create the agri-food system that we want and that we need. We are now preparing our second annual report, which will be published in the late spring, and will set out practical and substantive contribution and progress made by the Forum and its partners against our commitments over the past year. Those who have followed the progress of the call to action will know just how much emphasis we put on conserving and improving the health of our soils. To this end, I'm delighted to say, for the first time, we will present the annual award for soil and land management during our conference today. We had the largest ever applications for the award, which I believe reflects the critical importance of this natural resource to the future of agri-food system. Please do join us later today in the hall for the presentation and do celebrate the achievements of the applicants. One of the 7 commitments of the call to action is to build greater consumer awareness and engagement. To this end, we commissioned a survey of consumers in 3 European Union member states, France, Germany, and Romania, to begin this process. And we asked them why a transition is needed, who should take responsibility, and what ideas they had for the different change scenarios. Survey also explored the extent to which there are differences in perspectives of the different generations and between urban and rural communities. The fieldwork for this was just completed, and we will be sharing the results shortly. Finally, some housekeeping: Partnership Development, Advisory Council, international activities. Since last year, we've seen an expansion in the number of partners the Forum is now working with, including NGOs such as NABU and Eurocities, global companies like Mars and Arla Foods, and one of the world's leading fintech actors, the Land Banking Group, where some of my very good friends are active. We are delighted to have these organizations working with us, which has made a significant contribution to the ideas and solutions being put forward by the Forum for a more resilient, sustainable, climate-smart, and nature-positive agri-food system. This certainly strengthens our work, and we believe it responds also to Commissioner Hansen's challenge for greater collaboration across the boundaries. We also formed and held the first meetings of the Forum's new Advisory Council, which has both strengthened the governance of the Forum and been an important source of independent advice and counsel. My thanks to its first members, Tassos Haniotis, Anne Tatweiler, and Geneviève Pons, for giving their precious time so willingly. At a time of obvious turbulence in the geopolitical situation, we believe it has never been more important to not only maintain, but also to strengthen the dialogue with our international partners. For this reason, we remain strongly committed to the work of the Global Forum for Farm Policy and Innovation, which we established with the US Farm Foundation, the Australian Farm Institute, and the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. The Forum has extended its work on global ag sustainability and the role of trade, and tomorrow we'll co-host an event with OECD and the Australian mission to the European Union on measuring the carbon footprint of agri-food products. And I'm delighted that the leaders of Farm Forum, AFI and CAPI have been able to join us today and also tomorrow, both in person and virtually. Which brings me to the end of this long opening. Since I have started with Slavoj Žižek, let me also finish with him. I'm quoting, "I'm a pessimist in the sense that we are approaching dangerous times, but I'm an optimist for exactly the same reason. Pessimism means things are getting messy. Optimism means these are precisely the times when the change is possible." End of quote. Dear friends, we should just not accept the sentence we hear lately a lot. Yes, you are right, but we must remain led by the values, which are the backbone of European project. And it is critical to remember, sustainability is not in opposition to competitiveness, but an important success factor for competitiveness, security, fairness, and democracy for the coherence of the European project at large. Now, let's start exploring the new frontiers with today's very special out-of-this-world perspective. Mike, the stage is yours. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a fruitful and enjoyable day.